we're going to be on this earth not for too long, and I want to enjoy it while I'm here. I want to solve problems, and I really want to have fun while I'm doing it. And business, for me, if you're solving problems and you're helping people and you're connecting with incredible minds in the country, it's fun. There's nothing in entrepreneurship that I don't thoroughly enjoy.
Hi, welcome to the LeadUP Podcast. It's so great to be with you today. I'm your host, Lennox Wasara, an award-winning radio presenter and scholar of the University of Pretoria. The University of Pretoria is one of the largest contact and residential universities in South Africa, an institution with 7 campuses, 9 faculties, and a business school famously known as Gordon Institute of Business Science. Widely speaking, the University of Pretoria accommodates over 55,000 students. On this podcast, I speak to our alumni and we find out how they've gone out to the world and how they've made an impact. And they share their leadership stories, lessons, and indeed they just connect with their alma mater and inspire us in many ways than one, and how you and I can become a force for positive change. Today, I'm speaking to Andries Pretorius, who is a serial entrepreneur who's deeply passionate about real estate. This was a journey that began when he was 7 years old. At that point, he was merely showing early signs of unrelenting entrepreneurial spirit. At the time, he was selling toys from his parents' gate at their house. By nurturing his curiosity for business, he was already running a leading confectionery business called Willmor Candy Co. during his time at the University of Pretoria, where he completed his BCom Honours in Finance. Presently, Andries is involved at LeadHome. I can assure you his creativity, property enthusiasm, and business acumen will empower you. Welcome to the LeadUP Podcast. It's great to be in your company this moment. I am indeed joined by an exceptional entrepreneur, Andries Levi Pretorius. Thanks for joining today.
Hey, Lennox, awesome to be here, man.
Incredible. Your journey has been so interesting for me because you started entrepreneurship when you're literally 7 years old. Perhaps at the time you wouldn't put it into words as entrepreneurship, but when you look back, was it purposeful entrepreneurship or you just fell into it unknowingly?
I think that's such a good question. So I grew up in an incredibly entrepreneurial family. So my dad's an entrepreneur, my mom's an entrepreneur, and I think as kids, we saw that they loved what they were doing, you know? So subconsciously, we connected entrepreneurship with fun. And I think maybe that had a huge effect on the way that I saw entrepreneurship. You know, as a kid, it felt very natural for me to trade like Pokemon cards and to sell my toys through our gate at the age of 7, which might sound very strange now, but I think during that season, we loved to play stuff like board games, but I would like to know what the prize would be. Are we going to win something at the end of this game? What is the prize? Like, I'm incredibly competitive and I just love the thrill of doing a deal, you know, that sale. So I think it was never a conscious decision to say, listen, I'm going to pursue entrepreneurship because this is what the cool thing is to do at the moment. It was an incredibly natural progression into being one. I think most entrepreneurs are also born entrepreneurs.
Connecting that with a bit of research, it does show that there's a higher level of entrepreneurial intention amongst people who are coming from a family that has entrepreneurship or exposed to entrepreneurship in some way, some form within the family. So that's very interesting. So that was obviously the case for you. So how much did that actually influence you to want more of entrepreneurship? Because perhaps, you know, some people experience and they're like, nah, I don't want to be like my dad.
Exactly.
I don't want to do that. So you had the opposite where you said, hey, I want more of this.
Exactly. I think being raised in a family of entrepreneurs has an incredibly polarizing effect on the kids. You know, and I think a kid would then either say, like you mentioned, listen, I want to pursue this direction. I want to go into entrepreneurship because I saw my dad and my mom loving this field. They always had time. They were financially, maybe it went well. And the exact opposite obviously happens when your parents are entrepreneurs and they never have time for anything and they are constantly stressed about finances. That's going to be the last thing that you would like to pursue. And I think we were all lucky. My brother's also an entrepreneur now. He just sold his company to Supergroup for a massive amount. And I think if we weren't raised in this environment where entrepreneurship was cultivated, we would have never pursued entrepreneurship.
Yeah, drawing inspiration from the house, indeed. You spoke about entrepreneurship being so fun, that association you created with entrepreneurship being fun and back at home. Is that still the case for you now? Because, I mean, now it's a big deal. You're doing some big deals.
Absolutely. I think the moment it stops becoming fun, then you've got to question why are you busy with this, you know? And for me, and I say this to my wife like every day, like we we're going to be on this earth not for too long, and I want to enjoy it while I'm here. I want to solve problems, and I really want to have fun while I'm doing it. And business, for me, if you're solving problems and you're helping people and you're connecting with incredible minds in the country, it's fun. There's nothing in entrepreneurship that I don't thoroughly enjoy.
I always jokingly speak to my friends a lot about this, and we always say we're either selling time or we're selling product. Now you sold product at some point back at the University of Pretoria when you're still in res.
Yeah.
I mean, res life is always very fun. I mean, there's always these events happening at the beginning of the year. Everybody's enjoying to get back and meet their friends. But there's a lot of friendships that are formed during that time when you're at res. But when you're at res, you decided, hey, let me get a company running out of here. Because then you started a Willmor Candy Co, where you're selling candy floss at res. Tell us about that.
Lennox, it's the funniest story. I think as an entrepreneur, you're always looking for opportunities. You're always looking for businesses to start. And I think what happened with me was I was working with a friend. I think we walked past like a candy shop. And I said to him, listen, I think the margins on candy floss must be ridiculous. It's literally like sugar and a bit of flavoring. And then he laughed and he said, listen, he's got a candy floss machine at home. So I said to him, listen, don't you want to bring that candy floss back to us or bring it back to res and let's start a business? And that's what we did. So what I then did was like a classic entrepreneur, I wanted to test this MVP. And I then started getting orders from all the retail shops around Tux. And I started collecting these orders, and I bought a packet of candy floss from another store and I sold that to all of these guys. And before we knew it, we were selling to numerous retailers. And it became a proper business. Like before I knew it, we signed a contract to do all these big events so any event at Loftus, any event at Alice Park, big concerts. So we were selling thousands of these tubs. And we then got into some of the big retailers. And long story short, we then became one of the biggest candy floss manufacturers in South Africa.
Wow.
And I sold that before my 22nd birthday.
I mean, at the time, I don't know, did you have the imagination that this would be a big deal, or you just thought, hey, I'm having fun with this? Because you must have seen an opportunity within the market, within the student market at the time, especially at the reses, for it to be birthed. Yeah,
I think what happened there was, I think I've learned so much in entrepreneurship, and I think for me during this season, I want to solve problems that I'm currently facing. That's my outlook on entrepreneurship at the moment. And I think in that season, for me, it was literally just, I'm an opportunist, and I'm going to take this opportunity. We've got the machine. Let's try and make a sale. I had no idea whether the market was going to like this or not. But what I do think we did well was I think we were one of the only candy floss companies or candy companies in that time that had a website. We had barcodes on our tubs. It was a professional setup, so it looked like a big brand, even though it was literally myself in our res room, delivering packages before class and between class, taking orders, So I think I've created the perception of a big brand before it was actually a big brand,
Yeah, tell us a bit about that balance at the time. I mean, what are some of the lessons you learned? Because you talk about, going to class, delivering some stuff at your next person buying. How did you juggle all of that? Because sometimes as a student or working professional, that balance is not always in check.
Yeah, I think I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I was incredibly impatient, which is something that I've really had to focus on. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you've got to stay patient. I think during that season, probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned was that I am only one person, and I'm going to learn to let go of control. The quicker I can get to learn to do that, the better. And during that season, because I was going to class, because I was also an assistant lecturer at Tux, I had numerous different things that I was busy with. I had to learn how to get people in place that were way better than me at doing specific things. And get them to help me, So for me, that was a big thing. And I think even still to this day, you've got to be the dumbest guy in that boardroom, Get people around you that are specialists in their field and get them to buy into the vision and make them a part of your team. We're not islands, There's some magic that happens when you bring along people that are aligned with the vision that you might have.
Yeah, indeed. Always better off as a team than, we get more things done indeed.
Absolutely.
As a team.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm thinking now you have this great company. You now one of the biggest suppliers in the country for candy floss, which is really exciting. Now you want to sell the business. You said you sold the business when you were still just at Tux at the time. How did those conversations go about? Because now I imagine obviously, you're having conversations with investors and they're thinking, this is a very young man. I mean, I think it's a youngster. How did you deal with all those things, and how did the process unfold for you? Because sometimes I guess there's a sense of ageism that comes in because investors are a lot older. They've got a lot more experience, and maybe they can con you here and there with the deal. But how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so Lennox, what happened with me was I struggled to believe in the product. So for me, it wasn't a massive solution that I was providing a market. It was candy floss. I wasn't incredibly excited about it. So I knew there was going to be a time where I wanted to exit. And I was incredibly fortunate in that season where one of my employees had a mentor who obviously walked a long road with this employee that I had, and that mentor actually became the investor in our company. So I've already had a lot of credibility with this mentor. And we also had numerous conversations about the company, the vision of the company. I was incredibly lucky. So I never went out to go and look for investors for the company. It happened incredibly organically. And I think it's very rare that happens. All the other businesses you've got to get out there and you've got to get those investors. For me, I was young, things just fell into place.
I imagine the temptation must have come at some point when you're studying, because if you're making lucrative deals of that kind, I mean, the temptation might come into, hey, let me not complete my studies. But that wasn't the case for you. You actually went on and completed your studies. So what kept you in the thick of things academically as well?
Yeah, I think the big picture. I think from the start, I knew I wanted to pursue entrepreneurship and I wanted to go into business. I knew it. And I knew that I was going to build big companies. But I knew in order for me to do that, I needed to get the degrees and the honors degree behind my name. So I think it was the big picture. If the big picture wasn't there and I didn't have this vision of where South Africa could be in 30, 40 years, I would have probably said, cool, I'm going to take the money and I'm going to keep on going with this entrepreneurial route.
Yeah. So having the plan is very important, as you mentioned. But I'm not thinking the time you completed your studies, you also, upon graduation, you started working and you're working at a JSE listed company at the time, and you still had this entrepreneurial spirit within you.
Yeah.
It must have been quite a challenging time for you at the time. How did you deal with the fact that you have this burning desire, but now you find yourself sitting in corporate South Africa?
Yeah, I think to this day, I mentioned, and I speak to my wife about this, that was probably the toughest season in my life. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're not building businesses, it is incredibly, incredibly sad and daunting or unsatisfactory to be in a corporate environment. Like everything in you just wants to go back and start businesses. So during that season, the funny thing is I had a project in Mozambique, and during that project, I started a business again. And I think during that season, so we were importing products from Mozambique back to SA and we were selling it on the other side. And during that season, I just realized, but listen, I cannot run away from entrepreneurship. You know, the corporate is nice. I like the stability that this has to offer. And I've met incredible people on the line, but I'm struggling to focus and give my 100% because of these entrepreneurial ventures that I want to pursue. So it was tough. I didn't manage it very well, to be quite honest.
What would you do different then if you felt as though you didn't manage it well?
Lennox, you know what I did? I think in that season, I realized how badly I do not want to go back there. So I would do the exact same thing. I think whenever I think entrepreneurship is stuff, I'll go back and think, flip, I had to wake up at a certain time, be in the office under these fluorescent lights. I had to report back to these people. I just felt like a number, you know, and I think a lot of people feel like numbers. So I would do nothing differently. In fact, I would even stay a little bit longer to motivate me even more to pursue entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Now I'm listening and I'm thinking, okay, I like what you're talking about and I really want to be an entrepreneur and I've got a job going on now, or maybe I'm still studying, or maybe I've got, salaried income coming in some form through employment. And I really want to get my side hustle going. And sometimes people call this hybrid entrepreneurship, that middle ground between being employed and then whilst having a little side hustle, trying to get that going off as well as you want to. But it's a very lonely space. And what can people do to handle that lonely space, that middle ground that they find themselves in?
Yeah, as a hybrid entrepreneur, I think the reality is the following. Most entrepreneurs started their businesses as employees. I think research says like 90% of them did that. It's very rare. There's this whole thing around entrepreneurship being incredibly, it's sexy and you've got to go in full 100%. You've got to commit 100%, otherwise it's not going to work. And I think that's the biggest myth that entrepreneurs are facing today. You know, it's not wise at all. You know, being an entrepreneur, cash is king. You need a lot of money. You need capital. Before even that, you need to test your product. You know, and you can't test it without having a bit of financial support. So I've spoken to numerous people that are in corporate South Africa that want to start businesses. And my suggestion would always be, listen, start that MVP, start a small business on the side, test the marketplace. And then if it runs and you can see that people are buying into what you have to offer, then maybe make the jump. But it's not a wise decision to just make the jump and say, listen, cool, I'm 100% in this. I'm going to be an entrepreneur full time.
Yeah. So you mentioned more of a transition, a planned transition.
Yeah.
I don't think the social media era does any justice to that whole idea, because it paints entrepreneurship as a whole sexy idea.
Exactly. I think the biggest threat that entrepreneurship has today is social media. I think the perception, the amount of, like fake entrepreneurs out there today, it is sad, and I think social media contributes to this lifestyle of an entrepreneur. You sitting in coffee shops and you driving the nice cars and you're flexing. And entrepreneurship is probably one of the most unsexy industries in the world. It's tough. It's hard graft. There's so much uncertainty around entrepreneurship, and most businesses fail. So it's everything that you see on social media. A lot of that is not true. Yeah,
that's true. And one of the things you mentioned is a minimum viable product, MVP. I think for 3 years, my friend and I have been working on a MVP, and we've been putting a lot of hours into it, in that hybrid space of entrepreneurship and so forth. And one of the things that we have in common with you is the fact that we're creating a digital platform, right? Whilst you're focusing on properties, we're focusing more on the fitness and wellness industry. And we quickly realized that, we put that business to the shelf for now, put it to the shelf, because we have learned so many lessons, and we are preparing for a pivot soon, hopefully, if everything goes well. But that got me thinking about your pivot with your company, WeBuyProp. Tell us a bit more about how that pivot went about.
Yeah, so I think if we speak about pivoting, so pivot's a phrase that was coined by Eric Ries, who wrote The Lean Startup. And pivoting literally just means that I'm keeping the vision. So we've got the same vision, but I'm just changing my strategy a little. YouTube, for example, started off as a dating site. YouTube's now a video sharing service. Airbnb started off as a company where they were literally renting out mattresses, I think. Most big companies that we know of today started off as something completely different, and they then just changed their strategy according to what the market wanted. And I think as an entrepreneur, understanding pivoting, you've got to understand that the market tells you what they need. It's not the other way around. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and I used to do the same thing, I would throw something into the market, and that's why that MVP is so important. You'll throw something into the market, and you'll hope that someone's going to catch it and someone's going to buy your product. But to answer your question, what did I learn during that season because of the pivot? So the first thing that I learned was that in order to pivot, you need to start. And if I never started, most of these companies, even yourself maybe, if you never started, you would have never been in a position to understand what the market really wants in order for you to change that strategy. So that's that's a message that I share every single day. It's just to start. You're not going to have a perfect product. YouTube wasn't perfect when they started. Airbnb wasn't perfect when they started. Twitter wasn't perfect when these guys were never perfect. So just start.
With starting, just sometimes people fear that it might not be that great, but there's a lot of value in that.
So much value. Not just the fact that you're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn a lot about the industry, but you're going to learn a lot about yourself. And you're going to learn about the market. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I say to so many people, it's so easy to stand in the crowd and to say these guys aren't going to make it. But you're not the guy that's in the ring. You're not in the field. And there's something powerful that happens when you're actually in the room. You're in the room, and you might not have the perfect business. Might not be the right guy, but you're in the room. And for that's huge. So I speak about dots that connect. And these dots, we acquire them as we go through life, but you can't connect these dots. You won't form dots if you're not in the room. You've got to have conversations about entrepreneurship. You've got to have conversations about maybe starting something. As time goes on, these dots will all eventually connect, and before you know it, you would have maybe started your first business. But just get in the room. I think just start.
Yeah. And starting, you mentioned a little bit about connecting the dots. As a leader, you always have to connect the dots because you're trying to figure out why this thing's not working, why is that working? And you find yourself leading, people, leading teams at a time where you're still relatively young.
Yeah.
How is it, leading other young people? Because some of the research you've seen is showing that young entrepreneurs employ their peers, they employ other young entrepreneurs, other young people. So what is your leadership style like when it comes to leading young people?
Yeah. So for me, leadership for me is it's not a position, but it's an action. And the action for me around leadership is equipping people. It's about serving these people. It's about creating more leaders. So it's not a position, it's a place of action. And I think I mentioned this earlier. So I really struggled to give away control, especially in that season when I was studying, doing all of those different things. At the same time, I had to give away many different parts of that business to many different people in order for them to help me. And during that season, I realized the importance of leverage. So when I speak about leadership, for me, it comes down to a participative leadership style or a democratic leadership style, where it's a decentralized leadership style where you give the authority to the people in your team to make decisions. There's a lot of benefits with that. Some of them for me has been the fact that you get massive buy-in once someone in your team makes the decision, then they'll be accountable towards running with that, So I would say it's a participative leadership style. I'm not a massive fan of an authoritative leadership style where it's top down. I want my team to work with me. That's the first thing. The second thing about leadership, so I'm a Christian, a part of my faith. There's a scripture for me that broke up so many things for me, broke open so many things for me. It's in John 13 when Jesus realizes that he's been given all authority on earth and all power on earth. And the first thing that he does is he stands up and he starts washing his disciples' feet. And for me, that's the ultimate leadership style, is being a servant leader. And hopefully one day when I die, hopefully someone will say I've been a servant leader.
Yeah, that's true. Servant leadership is truly powerful. It's certainly in just really getting things done and helping people to build that trust with people. Tell me a bit more now about a point you made a bit earlier about the fact that when you were in corporate, you felt as though, hey, I wasn't really recognized as sort of like a number. What would you do now as you're on the other side hiring people that potentially when they on your team, you wouldn't want them to feel that way? Like what would you do to ensure that somebody doesn't feel like that when they're working for you?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first thing is, if someone doesn't understand the vision, where is this thing going? What problems are we solving? What are the macroeconomics in this business? Then it's very difficult for an employee to really get buy-in. I used to be an accountant, and as an accountant, I remember you would work, for example, you'll work with a debtors clerk, with a creditors clerk. These guys have no idea how the whole business works. They understand how to make the payments or to receive them or to follow up on debtors, but to understand the bigger picture is so important for me. And I think that's one way. And the second way is to give people responsibility in their company. They need to feel valued. They need to have responsibility. They've got to have the power also to make decisions. And I think instilling a culture of failing is fine. Let's fail forward. I think that's a big one for me as well. Make decisions. If you fail, that's fine. No one is looking after you. No one is going to come from behind and whoop you. Yeah. You want to encourage someone to make moves, take action, build things. And you can only do that when you create a culture that is healthy, where failure is encouraged.
That's so interesting, though. But with failure, it's so easy for people to label themselves as, I'm a failure, but it's not really the case. What would you say to that?
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that you fail doesn't make you a failure. And I think we very quickly make that our identity. The moment we fail, that is who I am, and life is tough. So the moment you just distance these two from each other, I think it has a huge effect on the way that you perceive failure. I've never met an entrepreneur or someone that's really done great things without failure. Some of my best friends that are doing incredible things today have built up this resilience for failure. They failed, they've lost a lot of money, and they've made a lot of money. But the way that they perceive risk is beautiful, and that's only because of the fact that they've failed numerous times. You've almost got to get to a stage where you enjoy failure, because the faster you'll fail, the quicker you'll get to where you want to get to, right? So you almost want to encourage that in an entrepreneur's life.
When you think, though, from your observation, why do you think people are so risk-averse, though?
Massive reason for that, I think, is culture. So in our culture, your dad would say to you, I want you to study, become a CA, become an engineer, become a doctor, and whatever, because it's a safe route to follow. And the reality is that becoming one of those, it's incredibly unsafe, because now you're working you at the hands of someone else. And I think we grow up and we get indoctrinated by culture and by what our parents perceive as safe. Their season, all my friends' fathers worked for companies for 50, 60 years. That was seen as, that's how you do things. So now a young guy says, I want to start a business. Everything in that dad is going to kick against it because they don't understand it. And it doesn't make sense to the knowledge that they have around business, maybe.
Yeah. Let me flip the dice a little bit, and it lands on success. How do you deal with success? Because you're a successful entrepreneur.
Mm.
How have you had to learn to deal with success? You have a very strong following on social media as well. So all these success milestones, how have you handled them? Because that's something that one has to learn. On the other side of failure is a lot of success.
Yeah. So yeah, Lennox. So for me, one day I want to get to to a place where I hear that you've been a good and a faithful servant. I'm not going to hear you've been a good and a successful servant. You know, for me that's massive. So I try and use my skill set and everything that I've been given, and I just want to be faithful with what I have, and that's for me success. You know, so I've never really spoken about success. It's not something that I take to heart at all. I just believe in you've got to be faithful. Yeah.
Okay, that's incredible, and also taking responsibility and owning it, and that's very, very important. And now I'm thinking more about WeBuyProp, your company. Just take us through just how did you arrive at that company? Because
Mm.
you must have seen a lot in the market, and having spoken to you for so long, I'm realizing that you are very good at wanting to solve problems. You align things with purpose a lot, and
Yeah.
you just genuinely want to solve people's pain points. So,
Mm.
WeBuyProp, no doubt, must have been a solution to a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I did was I did a lot of research and I tried to figure out what industries are currently being disrupted. And I said to myself, well, cool, let's try and figure that out. And I saw that property is a massive thing. And there's also, if you look at top entrepreneurs, there's always property. Property is always related to some extent. You know, if I'm not going to go into specific entrepreneurs. I then said to myself, well, if I want to go into the specific field, let me try and figure out how these guys actually make money. And then I realized, but wow, they make their money as property investors by buying properties that are way undervalued. They then fix them up and they sell them and put them back in the market. In fact, that's what we then did. But what happened after that was, and that's actually where we are right now, is we started generating a lot of seller leads in South Africa. A lot of people became aware of what we do and they wanted us to buy their properties. But we just didn't have the capacity or the debt, or we couldn't raise enough debt in order to buy up all of these properties and flip them. So we then started saying, cool, if we want to go forward with this business and we really want to scale it and we don't want to be dependent on a massive balance sheet, let's build a platform that connects. We've not built all these skills. Let's build a platform that connects the distressed seller with an investor. And let's take a very small percentage from that deal. And so the main problem that we wanted to solve was to help people to sell quicker. They don't want to wait 5, 6, 8 months. And then on the investor side, they were struggling to get deals that were below market value.
Yeah. You spoke about leads. You generated a lot of leads, but at some point you decided that you could actually sell those leads off.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a brave move.
So in this space, our bread and butter is a seller lead. If someone says to you, I want to sell my property, I mean, that is cash in the bank. And we've been, because I enjoy technology and I understand algorithms and I understand keywords on Google. So we have the ability to generate a lot of those seller leads. And I think a lot of people don't have the ability to do that. And that's when we said, well, cool, let's serve this market and let's serve this industry and give them these leads and let's ask them to take it away from us and we'll make a small amount when they then sell the property.
Yeah. A lot of people have been throwing that word disruptive innovation and all that stuff. And it's also lovely to hear, right? But like you are living that, right? Because you're literally going against the status quo. Is it really a conscious choice or it's more so because you're looking for alternative solutions to ongoing problems?
So my dad, if you meet my dad is an incredible human and he's always been challenging the status quo. And I think growing up in a house where the norms were always challenged, and he would always, entrepreneurship is out of the box. Entrepreneurship there's not a formula for entrepreneurship. And I think growing up in a family where I saw my dad challenging the status quo, that became the norm to me. So from a young age, I would also ask tough questions, and I would say, but can't we do this? Can't we do that? And I was never scared to ask those questions. And I think it also came down to the way that my dad also spoke about, you've got to fail. So ask silly questions, fail forward, but don't be scared.
That's incredible because your disruptor nature is opening up so many opportunities for you because you're currently involved with LeadHome, a company that's doing some exceptional work that's making us rethink how we buy properties as opposed to that fixed percentage. You're looking at a fixed fee, rather.
Yeah.
So going against the traditional norm, right? Tell us a bit more about that.
So LeadHome is a prop tech company, and we are disrupting the marketplace, especially for the sellers. Sellers today in the marketplace feel incredibly. Let me just go back 10 years ago. They didn't have enough information in order to understand the differences between different agencies. And today they're asking tough questions. They can sell their property on their own for 2,500 Rand, or they can list it on Property 24. They can download the same amount of information that an agent has for $80, a lifetime report, So they're asking tough questions. And one of those questions is, why am I paying so much commission away when I sell my property? And that's where LeadHome came in. We said, well, cool, we can solve that problem. Let's charge you guys a lower fee, and let's use technology to automate a lot of the functions that we felt agents were, the functions where agents had a low value. They weren't really contributing towards the deal. And let's get the agent to focus on the high value stuff. And we can see that the marketplace is really, they love working with us. We're selling a property every 5 hours. I think it's almost every 4 hours at the moment.
Wow.
And we're growing at an incredible rate. And it's exciting to see the marketplace just adapting to our product offering.
Yeah, growing at an incredible rate, and your career has also taken off exceptionally well as well. I'm just very curious, from your perspective, when you think about where you started from 7 years old to University of Pretoria, to having a candy business that you're running in Res, to the WeBuyProp company that you're running, and now where do you see yourself in the next couple of years? Because you're still relatively young, and I imagine the future is only bright.
Yeah, so I see myself in the technology space. I want to build businesses in this space. So the future is incredibly exciting. There are so many opportunities, and there's so limited time. But I think I'll definitely there's a couple of industries that are incredibly exciting that's caught my attention. One of them being the fact that blockchain has now disrupted every single industry. It's going to disrupt every industry. So I'm very excited about that space, and I want to learn as much as I can. I want to get involved in the community. I want to try and see what's happening in that space. So maybe in 10 years' time, I'll be somewhere. It might be technology, blockchain involved. I'm not sure where it's going to be, but I think it might have to do with one of those two things.
Yeah. But taking you back to where it all started at the University of Pretoria, when you think about the University of Pretoria, this is my final question. What comes to mind? What is that one thing about the University of Pretoria that certainly you will never forget?
So Lennox, that's easy. The line outside of that Fego coffee shop was always incredibly long. And I still remember every time I walked past there were like 100 people. And I'll never forget the amount of people that bought coffee at that Fego coffee shop. But on a more serious note, I think the relationships that I've built at UP has been incredible. And just to give an idea, in the year that I was a junior assistant lecturer in our department, I built phenomenal relationships with a lot of the profs and the doctors in that department. And to this day, I still have coffee every now and again with some of them, And that's something that I'll take with me forever. These relationships are incredibly valuable. And I think for me, and that just speaks so much about the university, for a prof to invest in a young kid, asking them questions, asking them what they want to do with their future. That's incredible. And the amount of time that these guys have been spending with us while I was here was just phenomenal. So for me, definitely the relationships. Yeah.
Indeed. Well, you've nurtured those relationships very well, so that's great on your side. And thanks for joining. I wish you very well moving forward. Your passion for entrepreneurship is truly encouraging, and we only can wait and see what the future holds for you. And it's only going to be good things. So thank you for joining the LeadUP podcast on this day.
Awesome. Thanks, Lennox. It's been awesome to be here.
While you've been listening to my conversation with Andries Pretorius, has certainly learned so much about entrepreneurship from his perspective, but a key lesson for me was indeed that you have to get started, don't hold back, and also failing does not mean that you're a failure. So you can dust yourself up and certainly get up and get going. Remember that you can rate and review us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, with episodes out every second Monday. Don't miss them. Remember, this podcast is proudly produced by the University of Pretoria's Alumni Relations Office. My name is Lennox Wasara. Our production team includes Samantha Castle, Alna Schutz, and indeed, our sound engineers are Louis Kluter Productions. Till we meet again, take care.